A sharp rise in tourist arrivals may be in store for Southeast Asia, with China set to loosen its travel restrictions this Sunday. While fears of a virus wave have prompted several countries to announce additional COVID-19 measures for Chinese visitors, many states in this region have made it plain tighter entry requirements are not on the cards.
Much of the Western world and North Asia, eager to avoid another wave of COVID-19, have imposed a negative test requirement for visitors from China. But Southeast Asia is taking a lighter touch and may be poised to benefit most from China's grand reopening. From Cambodia to Indonesia to Singapore, many countries in Southeast Asia have chosen an easier path for Chinese travelers, making clear they will not tighten entry requirements. In fact, of the region's 11 nations, only Malaysia and Thailand have announced plans to conduct airplane wastewater testing. Many leaders ruling out discrimination against any visitors, a fact perfectly in line with existing travel demands in China. As many as 76% of Chinese travel agencies ranked Southeast Asia as their top destination after rules were loosened.
There's still a lot of countries the Chinese tourists can travel without any restriction and also visa-free. A lot of countries are really taking this opportunity to claim and making an announcement that they have no restrictions for Chinese tourists. So they're very keen on attracting Chinese tourists.
Businesses in Bali already gearing up for an influx of visitors. The surging caseload across China of little consequence to many.
Kalau menurut saya pribadi, saat ini kan memang kondisi Cina itu lagi sangat tinggi COVID-nya. Bahkan kalau berita terakhir, rumah sakit aja sudah overwhelmed dengan pasien-pasien COVID di sana. Jadi sebaiknya pemerintah kita memberikan restriction sangat tinggi untuk itu. Jangan sampai wisatawan Cina masuk ke Indonesia dulu.
Up to 2 million Chinese tourists visited the resort island annually before the pandemic struck. Like much of Southeast Asia, optimism here about a swift rebound in tourist arrivals has been lifted by the decision not to impose restrictions.
And for more, Chani Vavani joins us live from Jakarta. Chani, Indonesia hoping to reach its target of 253,000 Chinese tourists this year. How achievable is this aim?
That's right. Prior to the pandemic in 2019, Indonesia recorded 2 million Chinese tourist arrivals, placing Chinese tourists in second place when it came to the number of foreign visitors. And given that Indonesia's tourism industry is certainly keen to bounce back, it is targeting over 250,000 Chinese tourist arrivals this year. Now, whether or not that target is achievable will remain to be seen. However, the tourism ministry has said that given the interest of Chinese tourists in marine tourism, authorities will continue to offer what they've termed 5 super priority destinations, and these are Lake Toba, Borobudur, Mandalika, Labuan Bajo, and Likupang. And authorities have also said that they will be focusing on the quality of spending and the length of stay of foreign tourists.
Chani, the COVID-19 situation in China prompting concerns in many countries, and they have imposed their own restrictions on travelers from China. But in Indonesia, we are not seeing the same level of anxiety.
Well, President Joko Widodo has previously dismissed concerns of a possible spike in COVID-19 cases from travelers. Now, Mr. Widodo said that based on a Sero survey, Indonesia's immunity levels in July stood at 98.5%. And so there was no need to carry out PCR tests at the Indonesian airports like other countries have decided to do so. Now, separately, Indonesia's tourism minister has said that authorities will continue to promote cleanliness, health, safety, and environmentally sustainable certifications domestically. He's also said that authorities will be boosting vaccinations, especially in light of welcoming the foreign tourists from China. Now, there is no sort of travel warning, and Indonesia has said that it wants to build a narrative that the country is welcoming Chinese tourists openly.
Thanks for that. Chani Vavani reporting live just there from Jakarta.
Let's now get to CNA's Lo Min. She's in Shanghai. Min, we just heard how many countries in Southeast Asia won't be imposing onerous restrictions on Chinese travellers. They are actually upbeat about China's reopening. Is their optimism justified, though?
Well, I think it is justified because there is a huge appetite to travel overseas. But at the same time, I think many Chinese travelers actually don't distinguish that much between countries that impose travel restrictions and countries that don't. Because according to the latest data released just on Thursday from the leading travel agency Ctrip, the top 10 travel destinations for Chinese travelers include Australia, Japan, and the US. In fact, Australia and Japan ranked first and third respectively. These are all countries that have imposed travel restrictions on China. And look, Chinese residents, they have completed PCR tests every other day for the large part of last year. So another pre-departure PCR test to go overseas, that's a small price to pay for many Chinese residents, especially after 3 years of isolation and sacrifice. And so Ctrip is saying that their overseas booking has gone up 5 times during the spring festival period. But remember, we are starting off a very low base because there's pretty much no outbound tourism throughout the pandemic. And still, when I talk to people here in China, many of them tell me they are going to prioritize domestic travel first because they're looking forward to reunite with their families in their hometowns. Some are delaying trips overseas for fear of getting infected with new variants in other countries.
And the issue, of course, is the rate at which COVID-19 is spreading across China. And Chinese health officials, they've just released the 10th edition of COVID-19 prevention and control protocols. There have been adjustments to it. How will these go down with the public in this new environment of relaxed curbs in China?
The new playbook actually isn't that different from what's already been in place so far. For instance, it says that patients no longer need to be centrally isolated, and discharge requirements have been loosened so that patients no longer need to test negative to be discharged from hospitals. Health authorities are also now accepting rapid antigen tests as a valid form of detecting the virus instead of relying solely on PCR tests. These measures are likely to lessen the load in hospitals, which are very overwhelmed even in large cities like Beijing and Shanghai, where healthcare capacity is at its best in the country. I went to a hospital yesterday in the emergency department, and every inch of available floor space, even the common corridors and waiting areas, are filled with beds. And I heard a doctor telling a patient that they have no beds available. Some patients are traveling every day to the hospital to get their IV drip and then going home again because there's no space for them to stay overnight. But still, they're taking it in stride. When I speak to them, they say it's better to get infected now than during the lockdown because they don't have to worry about getting a PCR test or figuring out public transport to get to the hospital. So these accessibility issues are now gone, and despite the risk of getting COVID-19, they're still supportive of these loosened restrictions.
Big challenges for China's healthcare system. Min, thank you very much for that. Lo Min there speaking to us live from Shanghai.